Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories, because sometimes the wildest secrets are hiding next door. Willow Heights always look perfect from the outside. Luxury SUVs in the driveways, lush green lawns, laughter drifting from back patios. Beneath the surface, though, secrets twisted through the hedges as tightly as vines. And nobody wore their crown more confidently than Chloe Harris. Everyone envied the Harris house, especially tonight. It was the first real heat wave of the summer. Chloe stood at the center of her poolside patio, her glossy lips shimmering in the lights, champagne flute in hand, strappy gold heels never sinking into the stone. She was Instagram famous, locally at least, and the pool party was her annual ritual. But this year, Chloe wanted more than likes and polite envy. She wanted to shake things up. And as the guests arrived, most of them old friends and neighbors, she felt electricity in the air. Brittany Lee, her best friend and the evening's co-host, fussed over the drink card, arranging edible flower cocktails. Around her, Alex, the DJ husband, balanced a Bluetooth speaker on one hip and a tray of sliders on the other. Greg and Tammy Larson, married since college and always ready with a joke, had brought a case of rose and enough gossip to last until sunrise. Mark Harris, Chloe's husband, greeted everyone with that easy confidence that made him Willow Heights' most trusted realtor. He and Chloe were always the couple to beat, everyone said. Or at least that's how it looked. Rounding out the core group of the Carters, new to the block, Derek, tall, charming, almost too smooth, and Lila, with a movie star smile and a laugh that sounded half nervous, half intrigued. The Carters' arrival had stirred up speculation. No one quite knew what they were running from, or to, but everyone wanted to be the first to find out. Sunset faded into a sultry dusk. The group clustered around the pool, trading stories about work, travel, and neighborhood drama. Chloe played hostess like a queen, snapping selfies, mixing drinks, whispering jokes in Brittany's ear, and shooting Mark's sly glances from across the deck. The music was a perfect blend of nostalgia and party starters. By the time darkness settled, everyone had changed from polite, small talk to the kind of laughter that lingers long after the punchlines are forgotten. As the night deepened, light flirtations began to slip through the party's cracks. Lila dangled her legs in the pool and leaned into Mark's stories. Greg and Brittany ganged up on Alex, teasing him about his taste in music. Tammy, usually reserved, found herself relaxing at Chloe's insistence, sipping slowly but with intent. Derek circulated with practiced ease, switching from charming to cool, depending on who he spoke to. And Chloe, always Chloe, floated among them, stoking small fires wherever she moved. By midnight, the guest list had thinned to just the core 8. The air held a different charge. Chloe announced a game of Never Have I Ever, and the group gathered in a circle of plush lounge chairs. The confessions started playfully. Never have I ever skinny dipped in a neighbor's pool. Laughed away as everyone drank. Never have I ever lied about my age on a dating app. Then the dares became more pointed. Brittany grinned. Never have I ever thought about swapping partners at a party. A ripple of laughter, a flush of embarrassment, but no one quite said never. Eyes darted, secrets started to surface. Mark, usually the stoic one, didn't look away when Lila answered. Chloe raised her glass, a slow, knowing smirk on her lips. Maybe we should stop playing safe tonight, Chloe said, voice low but unmistakable. Maybe we should do something nobody's ever done before. A hush fell over the group as her words landed. Behind a nervous laughter, an idea grew roots. Alcohol blurred boundaries. One by one, couples paired off, some intentionally, some by accident. Chloe and Derek wandered off to the guest cabana. Mark and Lila slipped into the guest room under the pretense of finding towels, and Brittany and Greg drifted to the kitchen for more drinks, lingering in the darkness. Tammy, feeling left behind or perhaps relieved, slid quietly into the pool and floated beneath the stars. Only Alex, after playing 3 songs in a row, crashed out early on the patio, sectional, oblivious to the threads being tangled around him. Time inside the house became patchy, dreamlike, as inhibitions melted. Some doors closed and music muffled. Laughter turned to whispers behind glass. Chloe's voice, always the loudest, was last heard teasing Derek as they disappeared behind a curtain. By 3 a.m., Willow Heights was eerily silent. The music still played, but only for the raccoons and the empty street. Tammy lay on her back in the pool, eyes half closed, the cool water washing away the aftertaste of too much rose and not enough truth. And then, as the first blue hints of dawn crept over the horizon, Brittany's scream shattered the illusion. The others stumbled awake, rushing to the pool's edge. Chloe lay sprawled at the deep end, her iconic gold chain tangled in her hair, her body oddly twisted, the water beneath her stained the color of wine. Chaos exploded. Mark knelt at Chloe's side, shaking, whispering her name. Derek hung back, pale. Lila sobbed openly, clutching a towel to her chest. Greg cursed under his breath, while Alex, groggy and confused, tried to piece together how the night had gone from playful to deadly. Tammy, half-dressed and dripping, watched in numb horror as her friends unraveled. The police arrived before full daylight, the siren's wail slicing through the hush. Detective Olivia Ramirez took charge, her gaze cutting through excuses and half-truths like a scalpel. She separated the group, started with calm questions that quickly grew sharper. Who last saw Chloe? Who brought her drinks? Who stayed behind? Where did everyone disappear after midnight? Fingerprints were dusted, phones confiscated, and pool water sampled. The first blush theory was accident, too much to drink, a slip, a fall. But Chloe's bruised arms, the mark on her temple, the panic in Mark's eyes told a different story. Somewhere in the confusion, a killer moved among them, feeding on the chaos of a fantasy gone monstrously wrong. As the sun rose over Willow Heights, every mask lay shattered. Someone had wanted Chloe silenced. And as the investigation began, the fantasy of the perfect party was replaced by one haunting question. Who killed Chloe Harris? The sun that usually warmed Willow Heights felt cold and intrusive the morning after Chloe's death. Yellow police tape fluttered across the Harris backyard, a jarring contrast to the neatly manicured hedges and the memory of laughter still echoing from just hours before. For the core 8, reality arrived like a slap. None of them had gone home. Instead, they sat in the Lee's living room, wrung out and silent, each isolated by their own fear of what might come next. Detective Ramirez was tireless. Her reputation in the county was built on finding the jagged truth beneath even the glossiest surfaces. She began with Mark, who was clutching a mug of untouched coffee, his knuckles white. When did you last see your wife? Mark's voice was a dull monotone. After midnight. She was laughing with Derek. I remember thinking she'd had too much to drink. I went to look for Lila and Ramirez cut in and his eyes stared at the floor. Lila and I talked. I ended up crashing in the guest room. I never saw Chloe again. Lila, sitting across from him, confirmed she'd spent the night with Mark, but insisted it was just talking mostly. The emphasis went unnoticed. Everyone in the room was too numb to care. Derek told a different story. I was with Chloe for a while in the cabana. We joked, we talked, but then she said she needed fresh air and wandered off. I went looking, but didn't see her again. I thought she'd gone inside. His voice was too careful, rehearsed, Ramirez thought. Tammy, still in her swimsuit under a borrowed sweatshirt, said little. I was in the pool for hours. I heard people, saw shapes. I didn't really pay attention. She shivered. In truth, Tammy had watched the group splinter. Mark and Lila retreating indoors, Chloe and Derek slipping out, Brittany and Greg whispering on the kitchen steps. She saw the way people looked at each other, the shifting alliances, the jealousies barely hidden. But secrets sometimes felt safer underwater. Brittany sat next to Alex, who held her hand so tightly her knuckles were pale. Brittany couldn't stop looking at her lap. I want to check on Chloe around too, but she wasn't in the guest room. I looked by the pool, but all the lights were off. I swear, I never saw her again. Greg, ever the diplomat, tried to fill in the blanks. He admitted to arguing with Chloe. About what? He wouldn't say, but insisted he left her alive and angry on the patio. She was threatening to ruin things. to tell secrets that weren't hers to tell. As the hours dragged, fatigue and panic settled in. The police collected clothes, combed the guest rooms, checked every door and window for signs of forced entry. There were none. Chloe's phone was fished from the pool's deep end, waterlogged but salvageable. Forensics dusted the heavy champagne bucket for prints. They'd know soon enough who last held it. Outside, Willow Heights was buzzing. News vans camped along the curb. Neighbors exchanged theories. Was it jealousy? A love triangle gone wrong? Did Chloe know something she shouldn't? Rumors about the party's adult games spread, mutating with every retelling. Alex's DJ booth and Mark's fancy sound system, once symbols of status, now looked like props in a tragedy. Detective Ramirez returned to the evidence, letting the group stew. She examined Chloe's last texts, half-written messages to Mark, Derek, and Brittany. "I can't do this anymore. Someone's going to get hurt. Tell Greg I know what he did." The implication was clear. Chloe had been carrying secrets, and someone feared she would reveal them. The autopsy that afternoon provided more. Chloe had been alive when she went into the pool, but was struck by a blunt object, likely the champagne bucket, just before. Her blood alcohol level was high, but not enough to explain the bruises on her arms or the defensive scratch marks on her wrist. By nightfall, Ramirez had the group reassembled. Her voice was calm, sharp as glass. "No one leaves Willow Heights until we figure this out. For now, you're all suspects." Her gaze lingered on each of them. Secrets are poison. They always find a way out. After the detectives left, the group splintered. Mark shut himself in the Harris bedroom, broken and silent. Lila tried to call her sister, but ended up staring at her phone, hands trembling. Tammy went home and ran the bath, curling into the water to drown out the images in her mind. Greg and Brittany retreated to separate rooms at the Lee house, avoiding each other's eyes. Alex sat in the dark, reliving every moment with mounting dread, wondering if he'd missed something vital behind the music and laughter. That night, a new message appeared in the core group's private group chat. No name, no number. Chloe knew too much. So do the rest of you. Be careful who you trust. At that moment, Willow Heights knew. Chloe's murder was only the beginning, and the true killer wasn't finished. Detective Olivia Ramirez stood by the wall of photos in her makeshift office, staring at the 8 smiling faces from Chloe's party. She'd seen suburbia's darkest secrets before, but never had the lines between victim and suspect blurred like this. With every conversation, she sensed lies rippling underneath. The kind of lies spun not just to protect oneself, but to shield the people you loved and feared in equal measure. She began by confronting Greg Larson with Chloe's phone records. Greg, wrung out and pale, flinched as Ramirez rattled off the calls. 7 separate attempts from Chloe to his burner phone between 2 and 3 in the morning. Greg shook his head, his hands knotted in his lap. "She was threatening me," he admitted, voice a hoarse whisper. "She said if I didn't keep Tammy happy, she'd ruin me. Tell everyone about everything." Ramirez pressed harder. "Did you see her after midnight?" Greg hesitated. "On the patio. She was drunk, angry. I lost my temper. We argued. I pushed her. She slipped on the wet stones and went down hard. I panicked, but she was alive, I swear. I left her there." The forensics team had their own story. The bruising on Chloe's arms matched hands larger than Greg's, but the fatal wound, sharp and crescent-shaped, fit perfectly with the champagne bucket Alex had been using earlier in the night. When asked, Alex claimed he hadn't touched the bucket since before midnight. But Ramirez noticed Alex's hands trembling, a habit he'd never shown before the party. Brittany Lee confessed to an argument with Chloe as well. "She wanted my pills. Said she needed to relax. I shouldn't have given them to her. I only wanted her to be happy for once." Brittany's anxiety was physical. She chewed the inside of her cheek raw as she described Chloe's erratic mood swings, the sudden flashes of jealousy, the veiled threats about exposing everyone's secrets. Meanwhile, Lila Carter was unraveling. She'd barely eaten or slept since the murder. Her earring, found by the blood-stained patio planks, placed her at the scene long after she claimed to have gone to bed with Mark. Under pressure, Lila cracked. "I saw Chloe fall. I thought Derek would help her, but he just froze. I tried to wake her up, shook her. She wasn't moving. I was scared, so I left. I didn't kill her. Across the street, Derek's story shifted yet again. He'd flirted all night with Chloe. That much was obvious from everyone's testimony and the flood of texts between their phones in the hours before the murder. She wanted to tell Mark everything. Derek admitted in his final interview. She said she was done hiding, done sneaking around. I tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't listen. When she fell, I panicked. I was afraid Mark would think I pushed her. Ramirez gave him a hard look. So you left her there? Derek stared at the table. No, I tried to sit her up, but she started screaming and I hit her. Not hard, but enough. I just wanted her to be quiet. His voice broke. I didn't mean to hurt her. He trailed off, shoulders shaking. Meanwhile, Mark Harris's world became smaller each day. Local news was relentless. Every headline shredded the image of his perfect marriage. Neighbors stopped waving. He stopped answering the door. He replayed the party in his mind, again and again. Had he noticed Chloe's distress? Should he have stopped the game before it began? Mark was haunted by the memory of Chloe's stolen glances at Derek, her laughter that sounded just a little too wild. All his old confidence was gone, replaced by the sick knowledge that he'd lost her long before the party and never truly understood why. Tammy, once the quietest in the group, became the only anchor for the unraveling core eight. She visited Mark, brought groceries to Brittany, and asked Lila simple questions about the night, sometimes out of empathy, sometimes just to break the silence. But even Tammy's patience had limits. She admitted to Ramirez, I hated that night. Seeing my friends with other people, the secrets, the games. I floated in that pool for hours hoping someone would notice me, but no one did. Maybe I didn't want them to. One afternoon, as detectives reviewed the evidence board, a breakthrough emerged. The forensics report came back. The skin under Chloe's broken nail matched Greg, but the partial print on the champagne bucket belonged to Derek. Security footage from the neighbor's Ring camera, heavily pixelated, showed two figures arguing on the patio. The timestamp, exactly the window when Chloe died. Detective Ramirez gathered the group one last time. She laid out the evidence, the bruises, the texts, the pills, the fingerprints, and let silence fill the room. Then she turned to Derek. Mr. Carter, your prints are on the weapon. Lila saw you with Chloe. Greg admits to pushing her, but the fatal blow came after. Derek's lips trembled. It was an accident. I tried to help, but she started screaming. I panicked. I never meant. His confession was raw, but the damage was done. In Willow Heights, the perfect party was a memory. The core 8 had become 7, broken, scattered, and changed forever. Outside, the pool was drained, the patio quiet. But the ghosts of that night lingered, a warning to anyone who thought they could control how far a fantasy might go. Willow Heights was no longer recognizable as the cheerful suburb of a few weeks earlier. The ripple from Chloe Harris's murder spread through every block. For sale signs popped up on lawns, playdates were canceled, and parents clutched their children a little tighter near the corner where news vans still sometimes parked. The residents all said the same thing: I never thought something like this could happen here, and then went silent, wondering if it really ever could have happened anywhere else. Word of Derek Carter's confession moved like wildfire, and the court of public opinion wasted no time. Yet inside the core 7, the damage was even deeper. Brittany Lee spent her days shuffling around her living room, eyes red and wrists fidgeting with the sleeves of her sweaters. Nights she lay awake, replaying the scene by the pool, Chloe's voice, her hands demanding another pill, the threat in her whisper about Alex's flirting, about Mark, about everything. Brittany knew her life would never be normal again, even if the police no longer called her every day. Greg and Tammy Larson hardly spoke. Greg's confession of the argument and the push hung in the air between them, an invisible wall. He tried to apologize again and again. I never meant for any of this to happen, but Tammy could not let go of the image of Chloe's body, the knowledge that a moment of anger had started it all. Tammy blamed herself for agreeing to the party. I thought it would be fun. I didn't think it could end like this. For the first time in years, they slept in separate rooms. Mark Harris, once the center of every gathering, became a ghost in his own life. He avoided the grocery store, cut his work hours, and walked through the empty Harris house with the silence of a widower much older than his years. Chloe's perfume seemed to linger in every room, her laugh echoing down the halls. At night, Mark stared at pictures of his wife, replaying every mistake, every time he'd missed what was truly happening. Lila Carter didn't speak to Derek after his arrest. She packed a suitcase, left a note for her husband, "I'm sorry, but I can't do this with you anymore," and drove to her sister's house in another state. She told the police what she'd seen that night, her hands trembling as she described the pool, the blood, and the way Chloe stared at her before slipping under the water. Lila wept for the friend she had, the marriage she'd lost, and the girl she'd once been before moving to Willow Heights. Detective Ramirez's life was filled with paperwork, court dates, and the grim satisfaction of having closed a complicated case. She wrote in her report, "Chloe Harris's death was precipitated by a cascade of jealousies, secrets, and impulsive decisions among her closest friends and neighbors. While Derek Carter administered the fatal blow, responsibility is shared by every adult who chose secrets over honesty. The psychological fallout for the remaining members of the group will likely last a lifetime." When the case went to trial, the courtroom was packed. Press, neighbors, even people from nearby towns. Derek Carter, face hollow and voice shaking, admitted to hitting Chloe in a panic as she screamed for help, not realizing his single act would be fatal. Greg's earlier shove and Brittany's pills were counted as contributing factors, but the law and community focused on Derek's moment of violence above all. Tammy took the stand and described the pool that night, the splinter of moonlight, the voices, and the chorus of regret. Brittany testified, sobbing, about the pills and her wish to take it all back. Mark, pale and broken, simply described the last time Chloe had said, "I love you," and how little he'd understood what those words hid. Guilty on manslaughter. Derek received a 10-year sentence, and the judge's words seemed meant for everyone. This tragedy was not the work of a monster, but of ordinary people who mistook secrecy and desire for harmless fun. Remember that choices have consequences, even in the safest-looking places. After the trial, what remained of the group tried to find their footing. Greg and Tammy filed for separation. Brittany and Alex put their house up for rent and moved to the city for a fresh start. Lila didn't return to Willow Heights, but occasionally called Mark, sharing apologies that always ended with silence. Mark, alone in the Harris home, began volunteering with a crisis line, channeling his loss into help for others. He still caught himself thinking he'd hear Chloe's laugh around the next corner or see her sunbathing by the pool. That ache, he realized, would never really fade. Every summer, new families moved into Willow Heights. The Harris house was redecorated, the pool refilled, and the parties began again. But those who had been there that night remembered, and when laughter took on a certain pitch or a neighbor's glance lingered just a little too long, an unease crept through the air. The crime had faded from headlines, but its shadow would never leave the block. And that's what no one on Instagram, no matter how perfect their pictures, can ever truly hide. Sometimes, the stories we tell ourselves about safety, about friendship, about fantasy are the ones that leave us with the deepest scars. Months passed, but the shadow of that night never quite lifted from Willow Heights. The once idyllic neighborhood now carried a kind of haunted hush. Windows closed a little tighter, voices dropped a little lower, parties less frequent and smaller than before. Even time itself seemed to move differently, as if the block collectively waited for something to end or to begin again. Mark Harris existed in a limbo between past and present. After the trial, he rarely left the Harris house, now stripped of its lively decor and Chloe's constant touch. Each room echoed with memories. Chloe's laughter over the sound of music, the scent of sunscreen and champagne, the memory of her hand brushing his arm. He found himself replaying their last conversation. If only he'd paid attention. If only he'd asked the right questions. If only he'd stopped that final game. Sorrow and guilt overlapped until Mark could no longer tell one from the other. He started therapy, but most days, only Chloe's favorite playlist and the hum of the refrigerator kept him company. Brittany and Alex Lee left Willow Heights for a city apartment, seeking the anonymity and fresh start they hoped would heal their wounds. But Brittany found that guilt followed her, woven into every anxious thought and every regretful glance at Alex. She deleted social media, stopped answering old friends' texts, and started volunteering at a shelter. Her therapist told her healing was possible, but Brittany knew some things could only be survived, not fixed. The Carters' home changed hands quickly, but the neighbors whispered for months about Lila's brief return to pack her things while Derek was behind bars. She avoided everyone, a shadow flitting between moving boxes in the early morning hours. Lila's sister came to help, but even she couldn't make Lila smile. By the time the sold sign went up, it was as if the Carters had never existed, except in the memories everyone wished they could erase. Tammy faced the future alone. She and Greg, after their separation, tried mediation for their kids' sake, but the silence stretched between them like a chasm. Tammy poured herself into her work, avoiding invitations, and steered clear of the pool clubs and girls' nights she once loved. She visited Greg's apartment only when necessary, her heart heavy with all the things neither dared say. Sometimes at night, Tammy cried for Chloe, for Greg, and for the laughter they once shared, knowing none of it would return. Detective Ramirez, story concluded, filed her notes, and moved to the next case. Still, the Harris case lingered in her thoughts. She wondered if justice had truly been served, if any amount of confession, therapy, or jail time could ever undo what had happened that night. In her report, she wrote, "When fantasy overrides trust, even the closest bonds can snap. The greatest danger in a community isn't what comes from outside, but what festers, unspoken, within." On the anniversary of Chloe's death, a hush fell over Willow Heights. Mark left a single white rose by the refilled pool. Brittany, from the city, sent a silent prayer into the wind. Even Detective Ramirez, far away on a new assignment, paused for a moment, remembering the case that had changed so many lives. New families arrived, kids splashed in the pool, music played again on summer nights. But the longtime residents carried a wary look, a reflexive pause before trusting too deeply or letting a secret slip. The block looked perfect, but everyone who had been there that night understood. The cost of a single careless fantasy can echo forever. In Willow Heights, the lesson wasn't written in police files or whispered at parties, but imprinted in the memories of those who survived. Sometimes, the people you know best are the ones you truly know the least. And behind every perfect sunset, a shadow waits, long after the party's over.